deals with is the property that covers the addresses 220 through 236 East 9th Street, which is in the Crescent Avenue Historic District. And Mr. Martini, I take it you will present this on behalf of the administration?
Yes.
Okay. Let me try to give a little explanation of this for the benefit of the public. The normal way that buildings get built is that an application is made, comes through our planning and zoning departments, and if it complies in all ways with the zoning ordinance, they get their permits and they build. If there is anything that they need by way of relief from the normal rules, and the most typical example of that is zoning variances, then that requires the matter to come before the planning or the zoning boards, depending on some of the particulars. If those are located in a historic district like this one is, it has to come to us, and we call it a referral. And I'll go into more detail later about what exactly is being asked of us, but first I'd like to let Mr. Martini make whatever presentation he wishes, and we'll go on from there. Members of the public will get an opportunity to speak, and frankly, this is one of the more interesting applications I've seen in recent times.
Chairman, just one correction. Yeah. It's not an application. I want to be clear that it's a redevelopment plan. Okay.
I know that, but okay, we're being asked to do something, so that's what I meant.
Okay, got it.
Okay, give us your name and your credentials for the record, please.
Sure. Stephen Martini, M-A-R-T-I-N-I. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. And I work at an issuing group in Montclair, New Jersey.
All right. Tell us what we can do for you.
Excuse me, needs to give his address, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, 105 Grove Street, Montclair.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Stephen Martini. I'm an associate with an issuing group. I'm presenting an overview of the preliminary draft of the proposed 197 Skylar Sites redevelopment amendment. And I'm presenting it before you for comments and discussion of the commissioners. And again, as Valerie mentioned, this matter is not to be voted on by the commission. It's just a courtesy review for comments and discussion. And I know your agenda is packed tonight, so I'm going to be as brief as I can.
Proceed.
Okay. So the plan was first adopted by City Council in 1999 in an effort to redevelop properties that were either in foreclosure, bankrupt, or city-owned. This is the 7th amendment of the 197 Skylar Sites redevelopment plan, and it addresses specific properties including 228 to 236 East 9th Street, which is block 824, lots 24, 25, and 26. Block 824, lot 25 was designated as an area in need of redevelopment in a resolution adopted by City Council on February 16th, 2021. Lots 24 and 26 were previously designated included in the redevelopment plan. And City Council has now authorized the planning board to prepare an amendment to this redevelopment plan. These properties are located in the Crescent Area Historic District, and each of these properties is vacant and has been vacant for a substantial period of time. And as you can see, it's along East 9th Street, along its western side. And as I said, they're vacant and cleared, and there are no improvements on these properties at this time. So the overarching goal of this amendment is pertinent to these lots, is to improve the streetscape along East 9th Street and provide appropriate quality housing that's consistent with the historic context of the Crescent Area Historic District. This amendment will provide an opportunity for infill redevelopment on vacant lots that will complement the Crescent Area Historic District's characteristics. So the proposed permitted uses for this amendment for these lots is single-family dwellings, two-family, three-family dwellings, and multifamily dwellings. And here is the bulk and area regulations that will be applied to this specific redevelopment area. They're very similar to the existing regulations for the Crescent Area Historic District. And just to note a few additional standards that we listed in the amendment, this area will be subject to Article 10 of the city's land use ordinance, which is historic preservation. An applicant for this redevelopment area would have to obtain a certificate of appropriateness granted by this commission, and any development would have to be consistent with the architectural style and building design of the Crescent Area Historic District. Minimum of 1.5 parking spaces per residential dwelling, and the parking areas that are to be on site shall be located at the rear of the property and not along the frontage or front yard of the site. And that concludes my presentation.
Good. All right, well, let me explain a few things for everyone. If you can get out of the screen sharing, thank you. There are three different parts of the historic preservation ordinance that one might apply to this. As I recall the history of it, and I was on the planning board at the time of the original redevelopment plan, these are properties that have just been sitting there vacant and overgrown for over 40 years, doing nobody any good, not even producing taxes for the city. And it was a bit of a nuisance. Now it's a different kind of nuisance because somebody went ahead and leveled all the trees, notwithstanding that there were no permits to do it yet. The large number of properties represented an interesting idea. For the city to try to sell off these lots one by one would be almost futile and certainly very disorganized. And the administration at that time came up with the idea that if we included them in a single redevelopment plan, it might make it easier to get these properties sold and built upon and useful again. And the number of properties in the city that are in this category has gone up and down over the last 23 years. This particular property, 228 through 236 East 9th Street, is 3 tax lots. And I think that may be one of the things that will be changed to turn them either into 2 or into 1. And the reason it's done as a redevelopment plan, it's a method provided by New Jersey law to bypass the regular zoning and regulations of many types that apply to development applications. So we are being asked to comment and to give advice on the inclusion of the properties in the district, in the redevelopment area. I think one of them already is and the other 2 are being added. Is that correct, Mr. Martini?
All 3 are in the redevelopment area.
They're all in it now. Okay.
Yes.
And to change a series of the regulations that normally apply. Now, the 3 sections of the code, I'm going to read this. Section 17:10-23 is called Application to Governmental Agencies. It is recognized that the intent and purposes of this article would not be fully served if the city were to control the actions of others but fail to apply similar constraints to itself. Accordingly, a certificate of appropriateness shall be required before final approval of any city actions on public as well as private lands, streets, easements, and rights-of-way. This requirement shall be deemed to include any action by any party which requires the approval or concurrence of the city or any city agency, and which is not otherwise covered by the provisions of this chapter. Because it's in a historic district, that includes this commission. And because the project, however you look at it, is going to require final approval of a city action sooner or later, comes within the section that has to be referred to this commission. We also have section 17:10-8, which requires both the planning board and zoning board of adjustment to refer every application in historic districts or on historic sites to this commission, the purpose of which is for us to provide our advice. Advice is a term of art, and it contemplates that usually a written report would be submitted, which is something that I'll write, assuming I think it needs it, and that I also deliver the report personally to whichever of the other boards. The other section is 17:10-5, called referral of permits. All permits or actions requiring a certificate of appropriateness for historic sites or property in historic districts shall also be referred to this commission for a written report. So the fact that a certificate of appropriateness will eventually be needed, even though there are not plans ready yet for us to review, is enough reason for this commission to be asked to give our advice. And the granting of a subdivision permit, which may or may not be part of this in the end, is a permit or action. And the, in effect, change of zoning would also be the type of action that has to be referred to us. So as I see it, those are the reasons that this is here. Mr. Martini, do you want to add anything to that?
I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay.
I would,
Valerie?
Chairman,
Yes.
I agree with most of what you said, with the exception of 7:10-23. That reference is to city-owned property. The city does not own these properties currently. And we can get Ruben to the attorney to come up with an opinion related to that. We are bringing it to you as a redevelopment matter. And you're absolutely right for advice and a report in terms of to be presented to the planning board, because they hear redevelopment matters. So I do agree with your latter 2 points. It's the first point that I differ on.
Ms. Jackson, I have the section in front of me, and it does not even allude to the question of whether the city owns the land in question.
Okay.
It applies to any city actions, no matter what they are. A good example that we had not long ago, we've had a couple of street reconstruction plans that are in the historic districts, and that required our approval. So I would say this probably falls into that category. But let's see how this develops.
Okay.
And depending on what happens later, we'll talk about it some more. Now, the public, I'm a little surprised, Mr. Martini, you did not mention this, but what exactly is the purpose of the redevelopment plan for this particular property? And I draw everybody's attention to the redevelopment plan's 7th amendment, which I'm holding up. It's 6 pages long. It actually involves three different properties, two of which are not in the historic district, so forget about that. We're just talking about East 9th Street. And on page 4 is a series of, I think it's 15 particular regulations, and states the numbers that the redevelopment plan contemplates will be applied to it. And most of these really are not controversial at all. Minimum setbacks for front and rear and side yards, they're pretty close to what the regular regulations are. Building height, maximum of 3 stories and 35 feet. That's exactly what we normally would see. And there's a couple of others, but the one that really matters, I think that everybody wants to talk about, maximum density. This would increase the allowable figure to 20 dwelling units per acre, whereas regular zoning in the R-CA district, which is what this is, calls for 4 units per acre. Remarkably, the minimum lot area, which is often what people dispute in this kind of case, is barely changed at all from what would apply anyway, 10,000 square feet. Mr. Martini, one figure I don't have is how much square footage are the 3 properties now?
It's roughly, I think it's just under 40,000 square feet.
So with a minimum of 10,000, well, I guess that begs the other question I alluded to. Is one of the actions coming from this the subdivision of what are now 3 lots into either 1 or 2?
No,
It'll leave them as 3 lots.
yes.
Okay, and has it been decided how many buildings would be built here?
This is just the regulations that would be if something was built. I can't speak to that.
Okay. I would like to lay this open to questions from the commission, and then I'll give the public a chance to make its comments and ask its questions too.
If I may, Chair, can I ask a couple of questions with respect to Mr. Martini? I just have a few questions with respect to
Sure.
property that is in this area. I want to make sure that I understand, with respect to these properties, there is only one property, I believe you said, that is in the historic district. Is that correct?
No, all 3 are in the Crescent Area Historic District.
3 are in the Crescent Area Historic District. And this is purely for the redevelopment plan. The designation of an area in need of redevelopment, that has already been made. Is that correct?
Yes, for lot 25. If I can, I'll go back to my screen again if it would make it more clear, or
Sure.
okay. So lot 25, this is the one in the center. This was the one that was recently designated as an area in need of redevelopment. Lot 26 to the north and 24 to the south, both were already in the scatter sites redevelopment plan. So now at this time, all 3 are in the scatter sites redevelopment plan and are also in the Crescent Area Historic District.
Got it. So all 3 have been designated. 2 were designated at a previous time than the lot that is in the middle. And with respect to the ownership of these lots, did you say that these lots are not owned by the city? Are they owned by different property owners?
All 3 are privately owned by the same owner.
Okay. All right, that's the limit to my question. I may provide additional comment later. The only thing that I guess I would provide with respect to the redevelopment, the local redevelopment and housing laws, that with respect to designation and redevelopment plans, the local redevelopment housing law provides municipalities with pretty wide deference in terms of providing a redevelopment plan for these sites. As the chairman accurately put it, the idea is to provide a way for properties that may not have been developed through the instrumentality of private capital, or who in some or which in some other way might have been blighted, that through redevelopment that they can actually be developed and brought to a good use, as opposed to being either vacant properties that end up having negative associations with them, or not providing tax rateables, and really a lot of the issues that can happen with a redevelopment property. But without going into too much detail, I'll save comment for later, and that's pretty much the only thing. Thank you, Mr. Martini.
Thank you.
Let me ask one more question before I hand it over to others. Part of the change that would occur by applying the redevelopment standards to this property would be that instead of one or two family dwellings, which are the only permitted uses in this district, you could also have 3 families, multifamily dwellings, or apartments. And I'm just going to ask you, Mr. Martini, is there anyone who currently wants to apply for a particular number of units, or how would they be distributed on the lots that are there now?
I mean, there could be, I think, a regulation that would be added to this plan with that if there was a subdivision, that subdivision regulations of the city would apply to this property. So if a developer and applicant wanted to, they could subdivide it according to the minimum requirements of what we're providing for this redevelopment area. Did I fully answer your question?
I think so. The square footage again was what, right about 40,000?
For all 3 properties together, that's about right, yeah.
That is just short of an acre. I don't think I can do it in my head, but was it 43,560 or
560,
something like that?
yeah.
Good. Okay. Questions from the commission? Vice Chairman Quirk.
Thank you, Bill. Hi, Mr. Martini. I think you said that these 3 lots are just under 40,000 square feet.
Just about, yes.
Larry, you're muted.
How's that?
Okay.
Okay. If this is just under 40,000 square foot, then this entire lot is about 0.9 acres, maybe a little less than that, correct?
Yeah, I believe it's 0.92 roughly, something like that.
Okay. And as I understand it, the current regulations would allow 4 units per acre, which you would be shy of anyway, correct? If you were going to build under that scheme.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And now you want to increase that 5 times, the density 5 times on the same lot that's shy of even an acre. That seems to be a very large increase in the density for this historic district. You want to comment on that?
Yes, if I can, I'm going to share my screen again.
Go ahead.
So I've prepared a density analysis to kind of show that the density that we're proposing is appropriate for this area. So
I didn't hear that. Is inappropriate or
is appropriate? Yes, for this area of the Crescent area historic district. So if you look along East 9th Street in particular, it gradually increases for the most part, from around like between 10 to 18 units an acre, and increases to well more than 20. We have properties that have 39 units an acre, 26, 24, and then even other properties that are westward are well over 20 units an acre. I think there's a misconception that these are primarily 1 and 2 family homes. A lot of them are 3 and 4 family, or if not more, on very small lots. A lot of the lots that I was calculating was 6,000 square feet, 7,500 square feet, even 5,000 square feet. So I think this area of the Crescent Area Historic District is denser than it appears. I think there's more from what I've done with this analysis. There's a lot more units within these buildings than it looks. There are apartment buildings there, as you can see at the north. I forget that I don't know the address of this off the top of my head, but there's, I think, 27 units here, but based on the lot size, it calculates to 78 units an acre. So again, I think it is an appropriate density for this area based on the smaller lot sizes that are present, and that these residential buildings are denser with more units than it might look from a public street view.
The numbers that you have here, 20, 39, 26, 24, 17, what do they represent?
That's units per acre. So I'm taking the size of the lot and the number of dwelling units that are present from the tax information that I reviewed, and that's showing how many units per acre that if this site was, let's say one of the properties is 5,000 square feet, it's saying if it was, that would be like about times 8. If it's, let's say 5 homes, that would be 40 units an acre, roughly.
Do you
If I did that
have
math right.
you have the raw data on which you relied to make this map?
I have the calculations. The raw data that I pulled from the tax information I don't have in front of me.
No, I mean, can you supply the raw data that you use
I
to
can.
create this map?
Yes.
Okay, if you would do that, I'd appreciate it. The designation of 4 units per acre was designed to keep this neighborhood looking residential. I understand what you're saying, that you think that some of these homes that look like homes are actually 2 or 3 unit buildings. But do you understand that placing 20 units on this lot with the frontage that it has will dwarf the other buildings as they look and exist presently?
I don't know if it would dwarf it. The buildings that will be proposed here may be bigger, but if they're at the right setback and are the same scale, like same height and similar massing, I think it would fit in. It would fit into this historic district.
I had the benefit of seeing a proposed, and I know it was a preliminary proposal, but basically it looked like you planned to build 2 boxes separated by a courtyard, framed by driveways on each side, basically 2 cubes with some decoration on the front, and then you're parking in the rear. Is that the same idea that still exists for this property as far as you're concerned?
I like I said, I can't say of anything that in that detail, but would something like that fit here? Yes, it would.
And you think that would be appropriate for this historic neighborhood, the 2 boxes with 10 2-bedroom units each in there?
Again, if it fits the requirements that we're proposing, if it's at the similar setbacks to what's there, it again, it won't dwarf it or like overwhelm the existing character. And if the architectural details that are provided on these buildings are similar and are complementary to what's already there, I think it's fitting. Like I said, a lot of these properties are denser than they appear, and there's more units than they appear, and they have parking in the rear as well. I don't think it's that much of a stretch that it's different than a lot of the residential development that's present in this area.
Well, I would tend to disagree with you, having seen the proposal that you initially presented. There was no effort to make any of those buildings look like anything that was in this historic district, either by decoration, configuration, or setback. So I understand what you're saying, but you're equating these, allowing a 5-time increase in density. You're equating that to other streets and other buildings that look like houses. Now, they may have 2 units or 3 apartments in them. I understand that. But it's what they look like. And therefore, their density effect on the Crescent Avenue Historic District is very different than this increase, what I consider a pretty substantial increase in density for this property.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman? This
Sure.
is Valerie Jackson. I presented to both the chair and the vice chair a conceptual site plan, which is very different than what we're asking you to look at today. We're talking about density here. We're not talking about design. We are really talking about density as it relates to the redevelopment plan. Any site plan, any site proposal has to come before the Historic Preservation Commission and must get approval from you. So that's not what we're asking of you today.
I understand what you're saying, Valerie. I completely do. But when I looked at that proposal, the concept, and I said, obviously it wasn't a finished plan. The concept was they were going to build 2 boxes. That's the way they got the 10 2-bedroom units in the front and the required parking in the rear. There didn't seem to be any more room to do anything else. So I understand what you're saying, but the concept was an extremely dense project. And that density comes from allowing it to go from 4 units of an acre to 20. If the density was lower, those buildings would be different.
I would point out to you again what the planner has said. The planner has presented data that says that the area is already dense. And with that data, we've all recognized that these properties haven't been developed in 40 years. The reason for a redevelopment plan is so that we can move forward with incenting development. And one way to do that is through density.
I understand that, but I don't think you have to incentivize a developer to the detriment of the neighborhood by giving him the extreme density that I think, my personal opinion here on the board, the extreme density that's proposed to be done. I just don't think it's good for Crescent. I don't think it's good for Plainfield. But
I think
we can differ on that.
Yeah, we can differ because what Steve is presenting to you is that the neighborhood is already dense.
Well, it's a density. See, what he's doing is he's taking a house that looks like a house and saying there's 3 apartments in it. Maybe one is a studio, maybe one is a 1-bedroom. That it looks like a house. A 2.5-story, 1895 vernacular wooden house that's part of the district. And he's counting that as, it's just the same as the density we're going to view. Now, number one, I'd like to see is raw data, but outside of that, I think it's a bit of apples and oranges just looking at those numbers. That's why I'm raising this issue.
Yeah.
Ms. Jackson, let me have a couple of comments about this. My concern is that if we let the city increase the density, the potential density so sharply, we will lose control of it thereafter. The horse will have already bolted from the barn, and our authority to approve the design will not be a satisfactory substitute for having the case go through the normal procedure, which would be with us and with one of the other boards for variance purposes. I also just want to point out, we did an absolutely total revamp of the city zoning ordinance, zoning map, and a bunch of other items that went with it when I was vice chair of the planning board, and I had a lot to do with it. And this neighborhood particularly, we made a very deliberate policy choice, which is still in the ordinance, that nothing should be in the historic district but 1 and 2 family houses with no more than 4 dwelling units per acre. Now, we did that knowing that there were a great many properties that were already of questionable legality. Somebody allowed a 3rd or a 4th unit to be put in decades ago. And we're still fighting to clean that up because it's very difficult to enforce against existing conditions. So the mere fact that the neighborhood is a lot more dense than this proposal says, that doesn't impress me. We made the choice to drastically lower the density, and that's going to be my position on this.
So, I mean, certainly you're entitled to your position. However, Steve mentioned this plan. This is the 7th amendment to this plan. This plan has been around since 2000. And the purpose of a redevelopment plan is to facilitate development. For a number of these properties, this particular plan has not done that. And therefore, we've looked at it and said that these properties continue to be vacant or blighted because the current redevelopment plan is not facilitating the investment that we would like to see in these properties.
And I agree with that.
And that's the purpose for bringing this plan forward. So again, the density, we can differ on that, but Steve has presented an argument that says that the area is already dense, and the people who are developing or investing in the area are putting increased density into the area. Those properties came before you for approval, and any other site plan would come before you for approval. And I do think that a lot of what we're still talking about is design.
Well, we're not really at the stage of design yet, so I recognize that. Right. Larry, anything further?
No, I think I've made my point. Thank you.
Okay, let's just go around. Gail, would you like to ask any questions?
Yes, I have a question about the open space. I see it says minimum open space 20%. That's pretty much what you're thinking is going to end up to be, 20%, and that's it? Or there's going to be a possibility of more?
Well, that's just the minimum. So there obviously could be more, but saying at least 20% of the lot will be open space.
And that, of course, does not include the parking, or you are including the parking?
No.
That's all.
Sandy?
What about drainage? And if you cover the lot with the size of the building you're going to need to get 20 units living in there, what does that do to I can't think of it.
To the infrastructure?
Impervious coverage. And the other thing is, if we go along with this, which I think is just way too dense, there's not much room for architecture of any kind that mimics what's already there in terms of front porches, side porches, and front stoops, and all that sort of thing that gives the neighborhood character. Because you're going to need every bit of square footage to cram these people in there. So I don't know how you deal with that.
Okay. Bill, you want to go next?
Well, I'm concerned about the increase in traffic, being as I live in the neighborhood. Certainly concerned about the density. And when the time comes, I will be speaking about the design, being as I live down the street. I don't want to look at a monstrosity.
Okay, John? Unmute.
Sorry. Yeah, I have a few questions. First of all, the chart with the requirements really needs to show the existing and the proposed. It's not of use to those of us who don't have all of this memorized not to see that. How is the FAR changing? The floor area ratio? It's 1.15 now. How is it changing?
Is that exist? I can't remember what it is existing for the.
All right. Well, I mean, then this chart is literally of no use. Worthless. Also, the buildings that you're calling out of similar density, are they contributing original historic structures?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, again, worthless. And maybe this is going to foster development, but if you're fostering development that erodes the character of the district, then you're just putting development over the character of the district. There's nothing about parking here, which could totally blow this out of the water. So
there is a regulation for 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, and that the parking has to be at the rear of the site.
That was encouraging. So I don't know if there's enough for me to evaluate. I mean, there just seems to be a sleight of hand here with jumping from 4 units to 20 dwelling units, but everything's just going to stay the same and you hardly will be able to tell the difference. And I think Sandy and Larry are getting at the heart of it, which is that these are not going to be residential feeling units with any character. They're going to be boxes that are pushed out to their maximum envelope to achieve this. And it may foster development, but it's not going to benefit the district, from what I can tell, unless you can show some kind of at least diagrammatic massing that will show how these two things can be reconciled. But there just seems to be a sleight of hand here that makes me very nervous. This is not a convincing presentation, and it has missing information.
Gary? Unmute.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you. I have a lot of questions, so I'm not sure if I'm in the time element, but I got a lot of questions.
Go right ahead.
Good. Part of the redevelopment package that was presented with 6 pages on it, all right, on page 3, the last paragraph, reads that with the inclusion of Lot 25 plan, cohesive residential development can be constructed on these properties. Located within a Crescent Area Historic District, the overarching goal is to improve the streetscape along 9th Street, all right, and the quality housing development that's consistent with the historic context of the district. So this was approved back a long time ago, like Ms. Jackson said, like 2000, all right. So I'm not quite sure how a 20-unit building, all right, is going to be cohesive with the residential area. All right. Now, it was brought up about doing the articles with the taxes and coming up with the formula that some of that area appears to be the same as what is being presented. I put forth that the tax records that are present and may be being used is totally erroneous. I've ran across this several times in the historical districts. I'm in real estate, where the tax records may indicate that it's a 4-unit, 3-unit, and in reality, according to the code, it may be a 2-unit. And we along the board ran into this several times where people come in and wanted to make it a 3-unit. And it's been consistently rejected and fought upon and fined along the way. So I'm not quite sure about the plan, even though it was a overlook and not the real plan, about improving the streetscapes along the way. Now, if you walk along that street and not get away from the pink building that's there and the other building on that, I'm not sure how you would build, like, I've been on this board for many years now, all right, and there's a lot of requirement that goes on in a proposal like this or a single house proposal that they have to meet our requirements, all right, in material, structure, look according to the street, and everything else. It is horrendous project to go through. We've been through it well, maybe over a year. We came back with people come back with several plans that was rejected every single time. All right. So the third item, providing quality housing development and consistent with the historic context of this district. I see no way how a 20-unit building could be put together that would match that quality on that. On page 4, we talk about, let me get to page 4. Okay. On page 4, it talks about the zoning and the number of families that are permitted in the Crescent Historical District. Again, I refer back to not the tax records, but what John said. If you want to refer back to the original, when those houses were built and when those lots were put together, you're going to see all of them were probably one-family homes. I almost guarantee that. All right. Now, and Bill, you need to answer this for me. Our code that you cited about the 2 families in that area and other things that relate to historical improvements, does that override what we're talking about?
That's the problem. Almost by definition, regulations in a redevelopment plan supersede what the zoning would otherwise say.
So what you're saying then, even though everything that is zoned there can be thrown out the window and recreated on the redevelopment plan.
I like the way you put that.
Okay, so do I.
I'll be talking a little more about it later.
Okay, I'm very real. Okay, so how does, and where did I see this? The bulk area and standards, how does that apply to this case? Is there requirements on that?
You asking me or Mr. Martini?
I'll ask Mr. Martini.
Go ahead.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. The bulk and area standards, okay, that you recited, okay, that would be 15 of them on here, okay. So, your plan is, I assume, is that you're going to be putting up 2 structures into that bulk requirements.
I can't say for specifics, but that could be proposed.
Could 3 units be proposed?
You mean 3 dwellings?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I would have to check I'm not sure what the frontage is of all 3 together, and if it could, I think it's a possibility.
Okay.
It'd have to be reevaluated.
So, you're asking us to give you opinions when we don't have any facts. And John brought that up before in talking about it. I don't know how we can have a discussion when I don't have reality. Okay, to me, that's fantasy or talking about ifs and maybes. I'm not a person to talk about any ifs or any maybes. I'm really a concrete New Jersey guy. I put it right on the table. All right, so that's a question I like to talk about. Now, additional standards consist of, and when we scroll down on page 4, additional standards consistent, would historical codes apply here? So,
Yes.
Okay. And do you understand all our codes that's in Plainfield?
I understand them, yeah.
Okay. All right. So, putting the historical codes, and you're committing that with the dwellings that you're talking about is going to fit those codes.
They would have to.
Let me add to that. Let me answer that question.
Okay.
Steve Martini is not the historical expert. I just want to clarify that. So when it comes to historical expertise and consulting, that is the purpose of Barton Ross. So what he's presenting to you is plans for the area. As it relates to meeting the historic codes of a given site plan, that will come before you and you get to make that decision. So I'm hearing still stuff about design, architectural design and engineering, which are related to site plan, not a redevelopment plan.
Well,
I just want to clarify those two things. So
I totally understand you, Ms. Jackson. But
okay.
what was presented to us is this amendment that was done back in 2001. All right, and change on it. So, even though Mr. Martini is here to represent something, and I'm not quite sure, something of what's being presented to us in this amendment, I have a lot of questions that I believe should have been prepared. So let me ask you, Ms. Jackson. So if it comes down to the historical district issuing that they're going to say no, that they're not fitting the guidelines, what would be your position?
I mean, that is certainly within your purview to say no to a specific site plan. That's certainly within your purview. Any concerns that you raise, as the chairman has said, he's going to prepare a report and it's going to go to the planning board. But the planning board will make a decision based on input that they get from you, input from the planner and the administration, and then they will make a decision about this redevelopment plan. So I just want to be clear about what the process is. The other thing I'd also like to point out is that the bulk of the properties in our historic district originally were large single family estates. And I also want to clarify that the legal record, I don't care what else is going on, but the legal record for a property rests with the tax assessor's records. So I just want to clarify those. So code enforcement may say it looks something different, but when we as a municipality go into court, we are dealing with the tax assessor's records. I just want to be really clear about that. So if the tax assessor's records are wrong and the tax assessor is supposed to go out, and I would assume we have a very good tax assessor, they go out and they inspect these properties on an annual basis.
Well, I understand what you're saying perfectly. All right. But here's the situation. They don't go out annually. All right. Westfield and the surrounding towns had done a tax reassessment on every single property where they have a company coming out from a third party going into each home and assessing exactly what's going on. That has not happened in Plainfield. All right. And I know many incidents, not only in the residential, but in mixed use with business and residential, that it's supposed to be one unit above and a business below, and there's 5 units that's above. All right. So that, and There's been times we've been taken to court because the tax assessment records are not up to date according to the code. So if the argument then is who's right, the code or the tax assessors?
The property reval is a very different thing than the tax assessor going out on an annual basis. Property revals are to make sure that properties are assessed appropriately and that the town is getting the appropriate amount of taxes.
Okay.
So it's a very different proposition. So I think we're talking oranges and apples.
Okay.
I don't know.
I lived here for 20 years. I never had somebody knock on my door for the tax assessors.
I don't know why
they open a door for me.
Talking about taxes, there's nothing about this case that involves the tax assessor at all.
I'm with you.
We're talking about property. When Gary mentioned property valuations are more accurate, property reval is very different than the tax.
It had nothing to do with what we're doing tonight.
No, my only point to this was Mr. Martini assessment on how he got to the density is not necessarily correct. That's my point.
Yeah.
Let me move on. The controls in the construction one. Okay, next one. I've been in the real estate business for over 15 years in this area, Plainfield, Westfield, Scotch Plains, and all over. All right. I've sold a lot of homes and did a lot of inspections throughout the homes. All right, that especially in this time of day, I've shown with customers 50, 70 homes in this market on it. So on the house value, it dictates on where they want to live in our town. All right. Bear with me for a second. The most common area most common sought after in this town is historic area. Okay. There's people from Westfield that downgraded their homes, babies left and downgraded their homes, and they come in and love the value of our historic district, all right, and buy $1 million plus homes in historic districts, okay? Those districts in that area are from, and some latitude here, from 7th Street heading south. Is the historic districts, pretty much, okay? Those values in the historic districts are much greater than any other value throughout Plainfield, okay? There's a lot of proof I can send to you on that, studies that's been put on it. Barton has done studies on this and presented it throughout his term with us, all right? So those homes, areas outside the historic district, probably would average from 250 to maybe 350,000. That's been the average that's outside of it. In the residential areas, we have homes over $1 million in the residential area. In this Crescent area that we're talking about, all right, recently there was a house sold for $500,000. All right, when that first went on the market, I thought it would never get more than 400, never. And it stayed on the market. The owners of the building did an absolutely amazing job on converting that from 3-family to a single family. The people that are moving into the historic districts, all right, from other areas, are coming in and doing the same. They're not coming in for an investment, all right, to invest into a 2-family or 3-family. They're coming in to buy something relatively reasonable and then put money into it to make it back to historical content, all right? Those areas, in this house, that's what I'm talking about, in Crescent area, probably increased that Crescent area by at least 10%. At least 10% of value, okay? That affects taxes, okay? And what we're talking about, assessing the value of a home on it, all right?
Mr. Snyder, I would not be proposing a redevelopment plan if the market in this area was stable.
And I'm saying it is becoming stable after all these years.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's been doing that over a period of time. All right. I know, Ms. Jackson, I know at least 8 people, and if they came in front of the board, I'm not going to go overboard, but I know at least 12 houses in the Creston Historic area that people have come in front of the board and converting it from from multiple families to one family. All right, and you can go up and down Crescent Avenue and see the ladders and the streetscapes and everything else that's being done on those homes. All right, so it is coming up on it. All right, the absorption rate in Plainfield, FYI information. All right, about 2 years ago, absorption rate is how many homes are for sale, okay, and how long will it take for a house to be sold. In Plainfield 2 years ago, 6 to 7 months. Now, under 2 months, okay, on that. And that's particularly in historic districts because people are seeing the value of those historic districts. I propose that putting a 220 unit in to historic district is going to greatly depreciate the values of Crescent Avenue. All right. So the Crescent area, I said that is investing in a tuna, is the town. All right. So here's the question. And this is my bottom line question, okay? And this is when I came across this and really looked at it, there was something in my gut that I had to get a bottom line feel for it. And it came out today, right? So the question is actually, being that your economic development, the question is, where is the town investing in? Is the town investing into the homeowners, or are they investing into investors coming in and taking advantage of an area like this? Okay, and that's a hard question for me to look at and answer. It was a really hard question for me to propose. All right, but the bottom line is exactly that. Where is Plainfield investing into? Into the current homeowners and promoting and getting them to improve on their homes? Okay, or is the town and saying, forget the homeowners, we want the investors to come in and take over?
I will be glad to meet with you to discuss our economic development strategy. Just quite frankly, we are doing both. And please remember that these properties that we're talking about were sold at auction. And so they were sold at a city auction. Mm-hmm. The town is not in the business of owning property. And so whoever the highest bidder was got these particular properties. So I just want to be clear about that. The other thing is we have some beautiful homes in the city of Plainfield. We have a significant homeowner community. That is not going to change. But in and around our train stations and downtown, we are going to have higher density. That is the strategy. I'm not going to take up any more time with the strategy. We're here to talk about the redevelopment plan.
I am. So, and I understand it. Please, 1 second more. 1 minute more. I understand all that, okay? With an auction, to me, it's buyer beware, all right? But in this case, I see the town helping the buyer beware to convert a piece of property in a historic district that has a potential to go into every other historic district throughout Plainfield and put a development into that. That's not respecting the single home owners. And that's going to lay fear in people coming into this town when they see a development that's in a historic district. I'm done.
Okay. Mario?
I somehow lost the name.
Mario, do you have any questions?
Yeah, no questions, just a comment, and it goes along the same one I made last week in regards to, last month in regards to the PNC building. I know there's multiple sore points here, and we'll get into design at a later date, but it seems like as residents of the town, really density is at the core of our issues. So I would implore, and I know it's not necessarily our purview, but I would implore that at some point we start to agree on standards, right? What is the perfect blend between modern and historic? If density is an issue, what is and I know the numbers change, I understand all this, but what is the multiple that we're okay with, so we can move on or not move on to the next level? That's that's just my 2 cents on this. I look forward to finding that.
Okay. Kirk? Unmute. Kirk, you have to unmute. There, go ahead.
I don't have any comments right now.
Okay.
I would like to know how wide lot 26 is.
How wide those lots are right now?
Yes.
Can you, Mr. Martini, can you tell us that?
Dimensions of,
I'll come back to me. I'll take a look.
Okay.
Right. I'm just going to add an observation and then open it up to the public. One of the things that we try to do as a commission is to preserve and improve streetscapes. When you are looking down the street on both sides, what do you see? And East 9th Street, more than any other street in the city, has a rather interesting uniformity of that. All the houses are blocky, they're squarish, and they're no more than 3 stories high. So on the dimensions, whatever is built on this property needs to match its surroundings that way. And I'm not sure that's doable at 20 units per acre. But the streetscape, you know, it's a vacant property. We have to do something with it because otherwise there's nothing there. But that's our job, to try to preserve and enhance the streetscape as it already is. Okay, Barton, any comments?
No, sir.
All right, April?
Oh, no, none.
Okay, good. Ruben? Don't think so. Okay, I'm going to open this up for public comment. I'm going to try to keep this to 2 minutes per person. If you're in the middle of something worthwhile, you know, we'll extend it a little. And Councilman McKenna has had his hand